Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's lecture, assuming that you can actually download this lecture as well, or this tutorial as well. Tonight we're going to be discussing files, file stream, and the binary formatter. So we're going to look at a few things. Mr. Cottrell this morning, if I remember correctly, did the Rhino practical. I think it was practical 9 that he did with the use of files. And you basically went through all of that. So I'm going to do something slightly different. So here's one example of where he took the practical itself and converted that. I'm basically going to play around with all the options so that you can kind of see what's going on. So I'm basically going to purposefully break the file stream of the binary format so that you guys can see what's going to happen in various scenarios. So if you want to see a working solution, I suggest that you watch Mr. Gottschall's tutorial this morning, but I'm going to intentionally break the file streams. So we're going to test things out that you are wondering about. Where do we use serializable? Where do we put the tags? What happens if you only put the tag on one of the derived classes and not the base class? What happens if you don't close the file? What happens if you use the wrong mode or the wrong access? So we're going to look at a few of those things and see how far we get. Here's 29, 9, 2020. At the end, we'll look at enumeration. All right, so let's just get a button over here. I know I confused a few people when I used form load. So we're just going to have one button here, and we'll call this button do something. Unlike do something. All right. So let's go into our button. So first thing we want to look at is the variables that we'll need. So from the lecture, you'll know by now that you need a file stream and you need to binary format it. But before that, you need to put on option strict, option explicit, and option infer. Right. And we can go and we can make our two files. New public file stream as file stream. We'll fix that in a second. Just want to show you what's going to happen. And then we'll do the same for our binary formatter as a binary formatter. All right. I think it's format, binary formatter, I think it's binary format. First thing you'll notice is it tells you type file stream is not defined. And remember, that's because the binary formatter is contained inside the sim subdirectory. Now, if you click on this small light bulb, sometimes it will give you the correct ones. So it will tell you either to import the library that's needed, which is the system.io library. It will, or if it is not a library that's contained inside Visual Studios or inside Windows or inside the system itself, it will create a blanket class for you. It will try and create an internal class for you. Essentially, it will just try and create the class for you somewhere. Otherwise, it will try and import the specific system that you're looking for. Now, io.filestream is accessible, but we want to import system.io, which makes it easier for us. Otherwise, every time we use it, you have to go system.io.filestream, which can get a bit tedious, but it's easier to read if we just say we're going to use the file stream. Same for binary formats. If you hover over it, it will most likely tell you that they want to, okay, you want to generate a class here, but that is because I'm using the wrong name for it. So let's just get the correct name for it. So we've got system. Let's see you paid attention in class. What's the next one? You can tell me. I want to see you listen in class. Any ideas? Okay, and what's next? There's about 4 things you need to do. What's next? Make it a bit fun. Come on, guys. I should not be faster than you. Serialization, and then? Are you sure? Isn't there another one before that? There we go. So, you take that, we import that, so you don't have to use it as the default. There's another trick around this, but I'm not going to show it to you yet. You're still going to have to do this old school. I think that's formatters, it's not format. Then we want to use the binary formatter. See, I'm lazy today. Noting. Right. So now we have we've got our file stream and our binary formatter. Now, one thing that becomes useful, you'll most likely always work with the same file. So there's 2 things you can do. You can create a constant variable, which basically means you can go public, if I remember the syntax here, public const, file name as string. And what that basically is, it's telling us that you've got a constant value, and this value will never change. So we can make it, let's just make it, call it test file dot text. The last part generally doesn't really matter that much, as long as you understand that it's reading and writing, because it's the program itself is going to handle what's inside the file. The extension, as I discussed in yesterday's lecture, merely dictates the default program that generally opens up the file. All right. Now, this being a constant does mean that this cannot be changed. If you try and change it, let's try and change it over here. It should complain. Let's just call it change, and it will tell you constants or constant cannot be the target of an assignment, which means it cannot change, which is something we want. When you use a file name, you want to make sure that you make as little mistakes as possible. So having a constant name, making sure that that name can never change or never alter during the course of your program or the execution of your program will help minimize the amount of errors that you can encounter. So let's go and create our first file stream. So when we look at a file stream and we create a new file stream, what do we do? Any ideas? What do we do? File name, okay. You'll notice, just for a quick reference, so you guys can see that again, you'll notice that there are a lot of different variations for file stream. There's a lot of things you can do. Now, we're only showing you one of these options. So if you ever want to go and play around with it, go and read each one of these things. they'll tell you what they do, but the small description at the bottom also kind of indicates what they do. So it's good to know the variations, but I mean, for our purposes, we're only going to work with this one. So the first thing is the file name. Now keep in mind, the way we're using it is in the default directory, the local directory. And I'm going to show you both ways so you can see how it works. Then we've got the access mode. So this is essentially an enumeration. First one is mode. So this is an enumeration. The idea here is, I want to see if it will show me the code. No, it's not going to show me the code. So the idea here is that you have various options. These various options mean different things. So you'll see at the right-hand side of here, there's a number linked to each one of them. So that append is basically a variable, and the value inside the variable is the number. But to make it easier for us, we use the variable name instead of using the number. So we are going to create. Now you'll see create is number 2. So it just means number 2. And then enumeration is also a constant. It's a value that does not change. Yes, you get I think there are bonus marks associated to enums if you use them in your group project, if I'm not mistaken. So we make it easy and we say file mode.create, but essentially if we just type 2, it does the same thing as well, which I'll show you if I don't keep on breaking my code. Just hold on. Yeah, we'll just type again. Right. File stream equals new file stream. We've got our file name. We've got our file access dot create, and then we've got our file mode. Now, sorry, this one is file mode dot create, and this one is file access. Now, if we look at this in terms of how I'm typing in now, do you see that because we know the second one is mode and the last one is access, it's easier to kind of just say file mode.create, because then we know we're going to create a file instead of saying file name, comma, 2, comma, whatever the next one's going to be. So when you're writing it out, it's easier to read, but it's also easier to understand what you're coding. So your code becomes a lot more readable. So the moment you start using values and parameters, and the values represent options available inside a function or inside a class, then using enumerations can really benefit you. All right, then we've got file access, and we want to write. So we're just going to go with write. So you'll see write is also associated with just the number 2. Now, let's run this and see what happens. So first things first, I want to show you the default directory. So if you click on your, not the solution, I think solution will open it up as well. But the solution will show you the file, the internal file. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is also just going to take you to the internal file. All right, that's also just taking you to the internal file. So inside the bin, we always talk about an executable. Do you see there's nothing here currently? So what happens when you build your solution? Every time you run your solution, it gets built before you run it. That build is the process of determining how the program is going to execute, what needs to happen in the back end, and the executable is created. So if you go to the file now, you'll see that you've got the executable inside the debug folder. So when you run your program, that is what is being executed. It's basically running that .exe, and there's the options of the configurations and the layout that we need. Now, this executable, if you break your program and you upload that to us, what gets run on ours is the last successful execution of your program. So if you ever wondered why every time your system breaks, it runs something different than what you coded, it's because it's running the last built or successfully built solution. So if you ever have an issue like that, just go and build the solution again. Just rebuild it, and it will override what is currently there and then make it new executable. It will replace all of those values, especially with the form as well. The moment you make changes and you don't save it properly, you can have a situation where you're running an executable that technically doesn't exist anymore. All right. So let's click on our button, and then I'll show you that the fact that we have our local directory here, we're not using any directory in front of this, we're just giving it the file and the file format. If we can do something, it does something. So we clicked on it once, so the file should be created. So let's see if that is the case, and you'll see there is a file. This is a file that was just created. There's nothing inside this file. The file is completely empty. Let me just close these. There's nothing inside the file because we haven't stored anything inside this file yet. And our program is still running. But now, I want to show you the next thing. The file's already created. It exists. So what's going to happen if we click on this button again? Now that the file is created, that option is not really relevant anymore because it's there. What do you think is going to happen if I click on this button again? Do you think it's going to crash? Create a new file. Now, just as a quick reference again, you already have a text file there. That file already exists. So what's going to happen now? It crashes. System.io, IO exception, the process cannot access the file. So because it is being used by another process. You guys see that? It's telling me that it's being used by another process. So the issue here is that we never close this file. Once you execute this, it means that this file stream is open. That temporary file is now inside your system, and it remains inside the system until you close it or until the application that holds that process closes. No, it's not because it's open in the editor. I will show you now. I can do that. Well, I can't really do that because if you create, it's trying to create. So you just need to make sure that we close this. All right. So we run this. Now, that file already exists. The error message is not going to tell me it's in use by another program again. What is it going to do this time? Is anything happening? Let's refresh. What's going on? You can tell me. Is it crashing? Okay, you say replace. So let's go and test it out. Let's see if it's replacing it. Let's go to the folder. Go to the pen, we go to debug, we open it up, we type something, we save it, and we close. So we've got 1 kilobit worth of information here. And let's run this again. Click on the button. So it's created the file. So let's go to the file, save it. Now you can already see with the size something happened. So we open up, what do you see? It's empty. So whatever was there has been overwritten now. So it basically destroys the old file. It or the content of the old file. So it deletes it and creates a new one. I wouldn't say override. It basically replaces. So it's not really the same as override. It replaces the old file. So whenever you code and you do tests and you save information, but you open up the wrong access method, and you keep on running, okay, but I've got the files, but why is it not working? It's probably because you're using the wrong option. Now, we told you you're only going to be using the two options, the create and the open. But I think it's important for you to know what the other options do as well. So we go open or create. Take this file, some random information inside there, close that, and run this again and see what happens. Okay, so I'm clicked on it once, well, more than once, but I clicked on it once. Let's refresh this page, and you'll see that if you open it now, our information is still there. So essentially what's going on here, if you're unsure whether the file has been created or not, instead of using an if statement to check it, you've got this open or create. So first, it's going to attempt to open this file. If it cannot find the file, if the file does not exist, it's then going to try and create the file. So you kind of have a two-pronged approach here. It's like, okay, I know that the file should be there, but I'm not too sure. So if it's not there, create it. But I have to warn you here. Open or create generally means you're writing to a file, but you don't care what's inside the file at that point. That's one of the reasons why we tell you we're only going to be using create and open, because at all times you need to be aware of what you're going to be doing inside that file. You need to know whether the intent is to read information from the file, whether the intent is to write information to that file. That being said, let's just add something to the file. So we're going to play around with the binary stream. So this is a new binary formatter. It forces you to write. How do you mean? With the open or create? So open or create just means that you're either opening the file, and if the file does not exist, it's going to create the file. It's not really a force you to write. It's just depending on what's going on, you might want to check whether the file exists. If it doesn't exist, you want to create it. So that's open or create. But it's not always to say you're going to write files. There's very specific situations under which you will use the options. Now, for us, generally we teach you how to check beforehand. We tell you to check. So let's say you want to create a file, but the file might potentially exist. What you would do is you create an if statement to check if the file exists. If the file exists, you'll create it. If it does not exist, you'll open it. So you'll use that approach then instead of using open or create. But open or create replaces that entire if statement. It makes it a bit easier to program because the functionality is already there. But because we want you to get used to the logic, that is why we're only going to be using create or open itself. Now, binary formatter, once again, to create a new binary formatter or just to create all the object to be able to use it, you just simply create a new binary formatter called the constructor with empty parentheses. Now, if you go look at the options here, you've got one with empty parentheses and one with some more selected or other parameters in there, but we're not going to discuss that. So it's not just for one thing, it has multiple things that you can use. So it's just one thing you need to be aware of is we're showing one method, but there's more than one method available. Always remember that there's more than one way to do these things. All right. Now, what I want to do is I just want to write something simple. Let's say we just want to test whether this is working or not before we do any complicated code. So let's go binary formatter. This should actually be binary formatter equals. Stop me if I'm doing something wrong here, because you would do it in the lecture. Binary stream dot deserialize, and then the file stream. That's perfect, is it not? You're probably thinking, no, sir, deserialize, you want to read something from that. Indeed, you are right. Seems like a 10-second show today. So, binary formatter, then we just write something, let's put something small here. Let's just say hello world. You guys know the hello world implementations of your first execution of code. Run that. Let's see what happens. So we're doing create, so we already know that the file itself is going to be overwritten with an empty file, and we're going to just write hello world inside that file, and then close the file once we're done. So let's save that, run that, and see if it works. So I save it, should have saved the information, and it is a 1 kilobyte file, so there should be information here. And when we open it up, you see a lot of gibberish over here. And then you see our hello world, and then it ends with some gibberish as well. I say gibberish, but it's basically these things are, it's the machine trying to convert it into something that you can understand, but it's something the application itself can't manage. So always just be aware of that. But now, let's try and read that. Let's try and put that inside a text box and see what happens. So let's get a text box out here. And then for the second one, we will try and read that. So our file stream equals new file stream. And let's just take our file name. Our file mode this time is open. And our file access is read. We will just close this. This is always my biggest mistake, and I always forgot to close the connection. All right, we've got our binary formatter, which is our new binary formatter. And then we deserialize. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it directly into the text box. It should be text box. Just going to name it. Okay. Text equals, and then over here we've got our binary formatter. This is the serialize because we're trying to convert from our file stream. Right. The first question is first. What do you think is going on over here? Before I highlight and show you what the error is, what do you think is the issue here? Why is it showing me a red line? Who wants to take a guess? Any ideas? I'll give you 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Conversion. So let's see. So if we look at the error or the warning being given, we see that it says function binary formatted or deserialized as object, deserializes the specific stream into an object graph, returns the top root of the object graph, and then after that it says exception, argument, null exceptions, runtime, but serialization, exception, and whatever. But at the very bottom you see option strict on. This allows implicit conversions from objects to string. So basically this is a conversion issue. Now we know we put a string in there. We know that. So that's not a big issue. So we convert this to a string and we simply read this to a text file. Is this going to work though? Am I forgetting something? So if I read, will it actually read something for me? And it does. Gives me hello world. But now let's add something else to this. It executes. But does it work? Is this correct? It worked, but is it correct? What do you guys think? Come on, don't let me go back to the 10-second show. What did we teach you in the class? Let's give you a reminder. No, that's not what I want. Is it correct? Why and why not? Let's see. That is what we have. This is basically what we gave you, and it has to do with these two lines. So with this, do we not have to inform that the conversion to binary is permitted? So string is already serializable. Remember, it's not a custom class. Most of the other classes already have. Let me see if I can get this. Them is as string. Hover over this. It's not going to open this class for me. But essentially, this string is serializable. I just can't open it here to show you everything inside that class. But the string itself is already serializable. Otherwise, we would not be able to do it. So there we go. Let's see if I can open everything for you. Right. So you've got your namespace. You've got all your imports up here. And where's the one I want? I haven't done this exploration in a while. And one of these, it says it's serializable. Just can't remember which one specifically. But it is already serializable. Any data type that's already inside the system is serializable, so you don't have to give it permission to do it. For a custom class, you have to give it permission because it's custom. It has to kind of follow the format that you have. You'll notice that a lot of these functions are functions that are either shared or that are just basically returned. So if you ever wondered what you can do with it, go and explore the data types itself. That's an interesting way to look at how you can strings, by the way. You can even do searches and all of those fun things. But inside, and I can't remember which one, unfortunately. I think it's this convertible. Inside one of these, it dictates the fact that it is serializable. I just can't remember which one, unfortunately. Right, but getting back to the purpose of our program. No, it's a good question. I'm just sad that I can't point out the specific one that makes it allowable. Right, so, but back to my question. Is this correct? No, it's not correct. And why? What's missing there? Let's see who's looked at the rest of the slides. Let's give you a hint. What's missing? Any ideas? What's the problem with just reading it the way I read it? No, not casting. As you can see, it worked. It never gave us a casting issue. We are converting it into a string, and it does read hello world. But I want to know what's the issue with this? Why is this not supposed to be? Why is it not correct? It works, but it's not correct. But why? Think about it carefully. We're trying to read this program, right? What specifically are we reading? Do you know what you're reading? Do you know how much content is inside that folder? What if I went and I did the following? Hello world 2. What's going to happen if we write it now? So click and create something, read something, it just says hello world. What happened to my hello world 2? Because that's also supposed to be there, but it's not anymore. So what's currently happening is the fact that it's just reading one thing. It's reading one item, and only one, but we still have more items inside our text file. And even if we only have one item, or let's say we have less than one item, then this won't work. So let's go to our text file. Let's go and delete that item and see what happens. Open that, we delete it, we save it, minimize that because we'll probably use that again. So we're not going to create, we're going to read. That comes back with runtime serializable serialization exception, attempting to deserialize an empty stream. So now it's breaking because there's nothing inside there. All right, so there's nothing inside here. And for the question about the exam, it's inside the learning guide. The exam code has been given and the exam timetable was posted somewhere. I can't remember the exact date for your exam right now, but it's already been preset before the semester. So just go and look at the learning guide. It will give you the code for the exam. I think it's X137, which means it's somewhere in the morning. And I think it's in the second week, if I'm not mistaken. Second week of November. But just look at the exam timetable. We'll probably post it somewhere on Eve at some point once we finalize the exams. But I mean, it's there. It's how you know whenever you write exams. It's you follow the exam timetable. The codes are generally given to you in your learning guide, and it's on the academic timetable as well. All right, getting back to this. So you saw it said that the file stream is empty. So the thing is, as you've seen, we're supposed to be checking whether there is something inside this file stream. So if the position inside the file stream is less than of a certain length, then it means that that length is beyond the scope of the file stream. With other words, if the position is 0 and then the length is larger than the position, it means there is nothing inside. Sorry, if the length is less than the position. Now in VB, the scope of the position always starts at 1 because 0 means 0 content. So if the position is of position 1, which is where it starts, and the length of the position or the length of the file is 0, it means there is 0 content inside the file. So let's go and test that out. So while file stream position, and if you're unsure about what it is, go and look at it. It says gets or sets the current position of this stream. Now, that generally means line by line going through the file, determining what is there. So you're getting that specific position you have already, and then the moment this while loop, the first iteration is done, it goes to the next one after you've read it. So then we go and we say file stream.length. And if you look at what that does, gets the length and bytes of the stream itself. So it looks at the current stream size or the content in the current stream, and it determines whether you can continue or not. Now, if you take this code and you put it inside, if there is nothing inside, it will not execute. But if there is something inside, then it will execute. So regardless of whether it is full or empty, it will run for us, but it won't break our program. Or so we think. So let's test it out. So we just create the file, so we get those two items in there. We run it, and we see this time we get hello world 2. Now, is that still correct? Is that what we want? Why is it not correct now? It said hello world 2. We've got the one item. What's wrong with it now? Come on, it's going to tell me exactly. What about the other one? No, it's not specifically that we need to add code. It depends on what you want to do with it. Yes, then you might need to add code. But what about the other one? The other one is also there. So what are we supposed to do now? Now, it depends on the actual application. So depending on what you want to do, you would have to test things out. So what I want to do now is I want to create a file. Let's create a class. We're going to make it an easy class, just so that we can have the class and test something out. So let's go and create a class for ourselves. Create a new class. What are we going to call this class? What do you guys think? What's going to be a fun example? Cars, animals, snakes, planes, lion. No, you guys did lines this morning. Class do something. I like that idea. Let's do something. Do something. Let's make it. Yeah, we'll make it an underscore. Do something. All right, and as you know, we add our options at the top. We'll just copy and paste it to make it quicker. Now, what else do we need to add here? So let's add an instance variable to ourselves. And I think we'll call this, you'll love this example. We'll make this private underscore name, a string, private underscore frac as boolean, and then private underscore mark as integer. Then we'll have our properties. Public property. You're probably seeing where I'm going with this. Property, what are we going to call this one? This name as string. We've got our getters and our setters. I'm just going to copy this format, make it a bit easier for ourselves. We've got track as a boolean, and then we've got, what was the last one here? Mark. That would be an integer. All right. Then we can return. I'm just doing this a bit quick so we can get the example done. Am I missing a conversation here? What's going on? I think you accidentally typed something in the wrong chat. Ah. There's something you don't understand, you can ask. I'm fine covering stuff again. But I can zoom in on the code as well. Where was I? As value, this needs to be a boolean. This needs to be an integer. Always remember, copy and paste is not your friend if you don't keep track. Like, don't post your number in the open chat. I should sell your information to a telemarketer now. Have them spam you. Promise you will never put your information in open chat again after that. Won't do it. I won't really do it. But just keep in mind, you know the POPI Act? So the POPI Act goes about private protection of private personal information. And if you put your information on the public domain, it is public. It's not regarded as private anymore. So if anyone in this chat gives your number out, it is not illegal anymore because you publicly announced your number. Just something interesting for you. All right, and then we can have a function. I think this could be a fun function. So we'll do a public function And this function will be is marked, I guess. No, let's just leave it empty. Let's just go with the display. Public function display string. So we'll return a string here, and let's return. Let's create a temp file for ourselves. So we go temp string. We go temp equals. Let's go name. We will add the name. So that would be name. Temp. We'll go. Did prac. Okay, prac. We'll add conversion to did prac. Add a new line. Let's see, what else can we add? We'll add the mark. All right. Then we'll just return the temp file. Now, going to our main page, let's create an array of students. As do something. Students do something. I know it's a bad joke. And then let's create a few blank students for ourselves. Let's first give it a size. Let's go read students. Let's see, how many students will we add? Let's add like 5. It will be quick. And then we can simply we'll get to the conversion for a second. I'm just going to create a constructor here. It will make life a bit easier in terms of processing the information. So we'll go public sub new, and then we'll have our say s name as string, then isna as boolean, and then our mark. All right, and then we'll just go name is name. We go what do we call it? The prac. Equals no, and then mark equals marky. All right. So we create 5 students. currently using student 1 equals new student, and let's just say student 1 will go student 1 true, and then with 85. Okay, why is it blank? There we go. I know it's not ideal and coding the array, but I just want to show you this. Student 2 false. Obviously, if he did not get the BRAC, he gets a 0. Student 90, and then student false. So that's another 0. Right. Now, here's what I want to get to. So we've got a student list. A student list is what we want to store. So we want to keep track of this. Let's say week by week, we want to keep track of this information. Yeah, right, sorry. Students. So week by week, we want to keep track of this information. So we store this information. So for I index as integer equals 1 to our student. Well, we know it's 5, so I'm just going to say 1 to 5. And what we want to do over here now is we want to write this to a file. So we've got our binary formatter. It's going to be serialized, which we know is a subroutine because there's no return from serialize. Then we pass it the information. So we pass the file stream where we want to store it. And we also pass the information we want to store, which in this case is students, but one at a time. So what this does, it just takes those 5 students, stores them into the file, but all one at a time. Remember, you can only store one thing at a time. So let's just run that and see if it works. Okay, first thing you'll notice, surprise, it hasn't complained already. Now it complains. System.runtime serialization, the serialization exception, type, and then it has the project name, do something is assembly, has a version there, has a culture there, has a public token not set, but it is not marked as serializable. So there is what you really want at the bottom. It is not marked as serializable. So the problem here is, yes, we're missing the tag. And the tag goes in front of everything. It's actually very nice. So the tag itself goes in front of the code itself, and all you have to do is say serializable, and then there you go. The entire program, this entire code is now serializable, which means it can be converted. It basically just says you are allowed to convert this class. That's all it specifically refers to. So let's go and do that again. Create, no issues. Let's go and look at the file itself. Update the file, you see things look different. Very different. So let's zoom in slightly and let's actually inspect this. So you'll see over here still some gibberish that you don't fully understand. And I want you to notice one thing. Do you see this 1 in the side? So Notepad recognizes that all of this is just on one line. Everything you see in here is on one line. I want you to note that. But they're all separated with commas. The information itself is being separated by a comma. Now, VB understands how to read this specific file, but in Java, next year, you'll be taught how to recognize them specifically, how to take a component and break the component apart into your own custom format, if we can say it like that. All right, so we've got some gibberish. We see, okay, we've got application name over here. We've got the version over here. We've got the culture over here. Then we've got a public token over here as well, which is just always empty most of the time. And here we've got the class. So it actually tells us what the format is of the information that's being stored, and then the information itself that's being stored. So the format is a name, a did prac, and a mock. So it identifies the format, but it also identifies the format of the class, after which the information follows. So you've got your student1, and then you've got your, I assume that is the binary, and then there should be a mock as well, which, so these three should actually be those values. It should be the student name, the mock, and then the boolean, and then the value. Just want to see if I'm reading this correctly. So the split should be roughly over, the split is over there, and that should be the last element. So everything before this element, everything there is one item. And then that VT is the identifier that splits the information, which is not really that important for you to know that, but it's good for you to see what happens to the internal file structure when you save your specific custom files, because this is essentially what your message says file is going to look like. So when you open it, you should be afraid that it's wrong because it looks like this. All right, now going back to our program. So let's stop this and now see what we can do. So I've coded before autosave. I've disabled autosave, but autosave is actually enabled here as well. It's a reference to load shedding. I save constantly before running code because it means that it's always saved. Now, for me personally, I've lost my third year project, I've lost my honors project, and I've lost an entire chapter of my master's because of load shedding. So I save constantly because then stuff like that cannot happen to me. So continuous saving is always a good thing, or continuously saving is always a good thing. It's never regarded as a bad thing. All right, so now we want to do something with that. So we want to read. We want to do something here. So essentially, we already have our file stream. We already have our binary formatter, but now we want to read this information. We want to do something with it. So let's create a temporary file for temporary storage. So the file stream and the binary format is always, I prefer keeping it at the top, and then I put my temporary systems closer to the bottom. So this is a temp student that we're creating as, let's see, as do something, do something, come on. Now, remember, you don't know how many students are here currently. You don't know if it's running. So one thing you can do is you can get the length of the current. So we always need to read them in any case. So we read them preserve our students, so temp student. And we just want to increase our current student count by 1. So we take our length and we just simply add 1 to that. All I'm doing is I'm telling it I want to use the array. I want to take the length of the array and I want to increase it by 1. So it makes space for whatever is going to be inside there. Yeah, it's going to break in any case, so we'll get to that when it breaks. Right. So we read them our temp student and we continue. So make sure all of this is fine, all of this is fine, all of this is fine. All right. Now, when we read, it's not the text box anymore. It's not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is basically allocating that specific student. So the current size of the student is what's being passed in the length. So once this has been done, the size of the array will have increased. So we've got our size of the array, which will be our length. How do you mean this? It depends on how you want to use it. Keep in mind that what I'm trying to do right now is I want to keep all of the students currently in the array. So if I dim it inside the while loop, every time I exit well, every time I restart this loop, it will redefine that specific student. So the size of the array here is +1 because it's dynamic in nature. I don't know how many students I have until I've reached the end of this specific section. So I need to kind of determine that by allocating everything here. All right. So let's just go, expression is not a method. Okay. So we've got temp student dot length, and we want to give this a direct cast. Direct cast. And what will I be direct casting? We're taking the binary format dot deserialize, and we're taking the file stream object, and it should deserialize that into a to something format. If I submit my code with that green line, that is not an issue. Not always. So you'll see over here it says that it's not been declared. So temp student is used before it has been assigned a value. A null reference exception could result at runtime. It says could result at runtime. Now we're allocating it a student over here. Now read and preserve keeps what's inside the array safe, but it's that it's never been resized in any case, so it has an issue with that. It's just a warning. If it throws you an error, you put it inside a try catch. Otherwise, you can just leave it as is. But we'll go through this. I suspect it should not give me an error, but I do suspect it's going to in any case. All right. So now let's run and see what happens. A green line is a warning. You can actually disable that. I generally ignore them completely because it's pointless. If it's going to crash, I want it to crash. So if that error happens, then I address the error specifically. But it's just warning you that you can have a situation of a null reference. But because of this line, it will never jump into that state when things being added to that specific item of the array. All right, so let's run it and see what happens. So we create the array, we create the items inside the file when we click on create, and we then say read something. And now it says system.null reference exception, object reference not set to an instance of an object. All right, who can tell me what's going on here? Surprise case for someone that gets this correct. So the preserve keyword keeps what's inside the array safe currently, but that's not that important right now. Any ideas of what's causing that issue? Do you think this will solve that problem? So readem temp student, we make it 0. Is where I stacked for. Okay. Why does that make a difference? I want you guys to understand that. Why does that make a difference? Let's run it and see if it makes a difference. Create, read, it crashes. Index out of bounds, out of range exception. Okay, so we need to oh, the length is always one more. Okay, that's the issue there. So used to other languages. Right. So we go create, read, and it says index out of range exception. Index was outside the bounds of the array. Interesting. So that still picks it up as 0. Maybe if we make this 1, see if that fixes it. So that is index minus 1. That's index because it goes to the maximum length of the size. So that will still be 0. That would be 1. That would be item 1. Okay, that works. All right, start position at 0. No, that's not the issue here. Why specifically does that make a difference? It's not highlighted anymore. Remember it said the potential issue can be an index out of a null reference exception? The issue is, do you see I'm calling the dot length? Okay, so the dot length gets the total number of elements in all the dimensions of the array. Now, readem sets the dimension of the array. So if I'm calling this, where is it getting that dimension from? That's the issue, is the fact that that dimension doesn't exist. It's empty. It's a null. So when it tries to call that dimension, it gives it null reference exception. And that's the problem. Now, just to show you that this information is actually working, let's go and print it out. So for index equals 1, index as integer equals 1 to, this time we use temp student dot length minus 1. VB always just adds an additional item, so just be aware of that. And I want to go and add a rich text box so that we can see every single item in here. So let's go, where's our rich text box? Add that. Let's call it our red box. Calling it a red box. So rich text edit box. And then we take our red box and we append it with the temp student index dot display. Right. So it's giving me an issue. So why is it giving me an issue? Oh, let's just say text. Right. So it's taking what we currently have and then just adding the display of the array inside. So right now we've got our 5 students that we add. So we save, we start, you run it. So this represents prac 1 now. It does the same thing essentially. It's how strings are used and created. So the AND symbol is generally used more for string. It refers to concatenation, where it adds two things together, whereas the plus sign indicates addition, but it gets overloaded when you use it with strings. So in other languages, it can cause an issue, but in VB, you can use it interchangeably. So we create, we read, and there are our 5 students. But here comes the beauty of it all. Let's stop this. Let's say every single week, we now keep track of the students. So let's change this to open, because the file does exist now. And then every week, we keep track of the marks. So you've got week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6. And if you open it up in the file, you'll see that it starts growing. Refresh. I think I just overwrote my entire stream. Where is my code? Ah, yes, I'm a dummy. I'm overriding the stream. Okay. So essentially, you're keeping track of all the information, and then when you call the information, it will print it out to you. But I'm making a mistake by overriding the stream the entire time. So it's one thing you can do with open and write. So when you read the program, you'll feed it in, you'll read everything. So you'll open up the file, store the information inside either a temporary storage space or inside a global variable, and then you'll add the new items to your as well, and then send it to the file stream. Otherwise, remember, that location represents your file stream, that represents your file. So every time you write, you start from the starting point of the file and you override what is there. For instance, you all agree with me there's five students here, right? Anyone see an issue there? Student 1, student 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's just go and make it students. We'll call them, let's actually make it a lecture. Lecture 1, lecture 2. Run this, start this. So it's still 5 over here. Create as an issue, null pointer exception. That is because there's only 2 now. Okay. So once again, create this, no issues, open up the file, update it, and you'll see that the first 2 items changed, but the rest is still the same. So what happens when you use the file stream, when you write to the file stream, you write from the top of the file stream, from the first item. So you override the things inside your file stream every time you write. So you need to make sure that you clear what you have, either store it temporarily to save it, to send it back to the file, or make sure you start at the end of the file itself. But we haven't shown you how to do that yet. So you will essentially just open the file, store the information, and then write to the file. But we'll never really have a situation where you'll have to do both at the same time. We'll always tell you, please write all of this to a file or just read it from a file and make it work. All right. Is there anything else you guys want me to do with a file stream or a binary formatter? Something that might be confusing you right now, or something that you're curious about whether it would work or not? Are you guys happy? Do you understand the purpose of the file stream and the binary formatter? Okay. Is there any other questions you guys have? I think we just ran. I think we're still actually on time. This would be the first time we ever finish on time. Or am I mistaken? Ah, we're still on time. Can you believe it? We actually still have 10 minutes left. Is there anything else you guys want me to show you? Anything you're curious about? You guys suddenly became very quiet. Scroll down where? There's nothing down. What, is this a part where you copy and paste my code now? So what do you want to see specifically? Tell me, what part are you looking at? Come on guys, you're quiet. What? Oh, but I've been using this every Tuesday for the last few weeks. Alright, this line. Is that the one you're referring to? I'm still typing. Come on. This is recorded. You can download it afterwards. I'll even post this code in the chat. Oh, for Pete's sakes. There. Copy from the chat. Is it... Why did I say it from... No, it's from 1. 120, where... No. So, what it's doing is... If there is nothing there, then this will not execute. So 120, it will be of length 1 because VB always adds that additional element. So it'll be 1 of 1, which means there will be nothing there. Let's do this. Create. Take that away. Run that. So basically, we're clearing out this table, so there's nothing inside. We run it, and you see nothing happens because it doesn't execute anything. There's nothing to execute. So essentially, this never runs because it's empty. Because the array is of length 0, it is technically of element 1, and 1 to 1, there's nothing there to post, so nothing is going to be posted. Oh, typing the question. Okay. Well, I can't delete the code from the chat, so it does not matter when I start by creating file before do everything? How do you mean? You mean up here? Look, the only time these two lines are needed is when you're writing to the file. So if you're doing input, you can do all your input up here. So let's say this could be all your input and your declarations, and this could be where you you put everything inside the file. So rule of thumb, and this is my personal tip to you now, is when you're working with a stream, only have the stream open when you need it to be open. If you opened up over here, let's say you open the stream here, and then you do the input only after this, you're wasting resources essentially. It's going to be an empty file in any case, but it's you have extra computational overheads to keep track of that information now while you're still taking input. And during that process, if it's in that right state, no one else can access that file. So essentially the file is locked and no one can access it or modify it, which is an issue. But if you do your input up here and then open up your file streams, when your system crashes, you know it crashes after the point of input. You'll know where it crashes specifically as well. So it also makes it a bit easier to read. So you do all of your input, then you open your file stream and your binary formatter, and then you place it inside the file stream and close it immediately afterwards. Same thing down here. We only started with them over here because we're going to use them immediately afterwards. Essentially, these two lines could have been placed above the files as well. Files are interesting. I mean, this is only sequential files. Wait until we get random access files, because that starts leaning towards a database solution, and that's what we're going to focus on primarily next year. So I just want to make sure you guys understand what's going on right now, because it's important to have the fundamentals down. Line 4 and 5, what do you mean? Well, essentially you need binary formats, so 5 and 6. It's just the different categories. So it's just if you include the formatter, it includes everything after that. But if I go .binary, it just includes the binary stuff, which is what we want right now. We don't want everything else. The more specific you are over here, the less it imports into your application. Remember, these are now libraries that are used inside your application. So the more libraries you use, the bigger your program is going to become in terms of overhead. So you want to be as specific as possible, and that's sometimes why they refer to them directly, because then it's based on the machine and not based on your code, if that makes sense to you. Because imports, make sure it's always inside the application itself. And when you deploy it, there's some additional thing you have to do, but basically it's sometimes easier to deploy if you've imported it. But that, once again, that's a worry for later on. It's not a discussion for right now. The imports themselves, you'll go into detail regarding the imports, I think, in Java next year. Do you guys do imports in C++ yet? I know you do the header files, but it's not really okay. So next year you'll be using imports a lot next year, especially when you get to Java. So that is where you really start learning what they do specifically. But basically what it's doing is it's importing the library into the application so that you can call the function. So over here we call the function itself, or the data type itself, file stream and the binary formatter. If we don't include it, we have to include the library itself. For instance, you guys will all understand that when you use an absolute function, what do you do before you use the absolute function inside VB? Because I know some of you have used it before. When you use mathematical functions, what do you do? Do you just go absolute and there it works? Or do you normally go math dot absolute? All right. Now that is the same principle. That math is a it's part of a directory. So basically, you're telling it you're going to the math section and you're using the absolute function under math. And you'll see if I hover over it, it is system.math. Whereas with a file stream, or with a file stream over here, it's system.io.filestream, and the binary format is, well, all of those things before it gets there. But math.absolute we normally just write out because it's quite quick to write it out like that. But I mean, can you imagine having to write that out every single time you want to declare a file stream? Some of you don't see the point because you're going to use it once every year, and that's why you can do it like that. You don't have to put it at the top. Essentially, you can, if you want to, just put it at the bottom, making sure you reference it correctly. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just one way of looking at it. You've just noticed that students prefer to import the things because then they don't have to type as much. Right. So the questions are becoming, I wouldn't say off topic, but it's more just relaxed questions. So I'm going to stop the recording here. You're still more than welcome to ask questions. I'll still be around for a while, but I'm just going to stop the recording here for the others. If you, like I said, if you want to see a full solution based on one of the pracs, I think it's the prac 9 using files, watch this morning, Tuesday morning's tutorial. Mr. Cottrell went through the full implementation of prac 9 with files, how they converted the downcasting, the upcasting, how you save it, how you look at it. I purely went and looked at the various things, and we broke it, and we discussed the theory, and we looked at what some of the things did. So I purely looked at file streams and binary formats, but Mr. Cottrell looked at an entire practical and went through that. So if you are struggling with these, I would maybe recommend, if it's file stream or binary format specific, maybe watch this one. Well, if you're watching it, then obviously you're probably watching it first. But if you want to get something more after this, you can watch Mr. Cottrell's stream. But if you're happy after watching this, then you're fine. There's no need to go and watch another one again after this. All right. But in any case, I'll see you guys tomorrow in the lecture. Otherwise, great day, great evening, great morning further. Almost left.